Dr. Raluca Anton has a PhD in psychology. She's an author, senior psychotherapist, supervisor in cognitive behavioral psychotherapies, and relational therapist with international training. In addition to scientific articles published in specialized journals, over the years she has written for numerous publications and released the book Terapie 1 la 1 cu sinele tău, one-on-one therapy with your own self, and Povestea ta are sens, your story has meaning. Raluca has more than 17 years of experience in working with people, be it in the process of psychotherapy, counseling, coaching, or training. Together with the journalist Andreea Brasovean, she also has a TV project called Cu mintea Deschisa, with your mind wide open, broadcasted on Digi24. Let's find out how we can lead ourselves in order to lead others from Raluca Anton, and let's welcome her with a big round of applause to Târgu-Mureș.
Thank you so much, Ovidiu. I entered with my cup of water. My students always say that when they have a memory with me, it's with a cup of coffee. So I entered with a cup of coffee with me. Maybe you're asking yourselves, why am I here on this stage discussing about leadership? And what I realized is that when I started training in relational therapy for working with couples almost 10 years ago, one thing that I realized is that so many principles from couples therapy apply to leadership and apply to working with other people. So what I did 8 years ago is that I started to translate all these principles from couples therapy in working with people from companies, helping them understand better how they work as a team and understand themselves. So this is how I started my journey in working with companies and with leadership teams 8 years ago with a big company. And after my first interaction, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm going to screw everything for them. And then I realized that, well, we have the same brain, so we take this brain with us in each relationship. So all the things that I learned in couples therapy might really work in working with teams. Because we have similar buttons that are pushed in our relationships, and because there are so many things that we have to understand about ourselves in order to be better together, in order to work better, in order to feel better in our workplaces. So that's how I started this program that I call Lead Yourself to Lead Others. And I'm working with leadership teams in order to help them better understand themselves, to understand the people that they work with, and to create a safe environment. Because this is what we know during these days, that we also need psychological safety at our workplaces. It's not enough to know what we know and to know what we don't know and to learn technical things. It's also important to feel safe from a psychological point of view in order to be able to apply all the things that we know. Because one thing that we know from psychology is that we might be very good in our environment and in our work, but if we don't feel safe, emotionally speaking, everything that we know will not be able to be applied in our workplaces. So feeling safe, it's not only about our emotional world, but it's also about how we work and how we can apply everything that we know in our workplaces. So what we're going to discuss today are a few mistakes that leaders make and how we can work with these mistakes and how we can help them better understand themselves in order to better understand others and to better understand how they can lead their teams so they not only be productive but only be teams that they feel safe inside. So what do you think are the most common mistakes that a leader makes? You can just pop like popcorn, and I'll mirror what you say. What do you think are the most common mistakes? Don't be shy. Micromanagement, making assumptions. Once again, they do no mistakes. Not doing what they preach. Criticizing. Communicating aggressively. Doing everything alone. Not paying attention to employees' needs. So many things that a leader doesn't do well, right? What does a leader do well then? Listen. What else? Lead by example. So the opposite of all these things that we already listened, right? So the first thing that I did when I researched for my presentation is that I, of course, talked a little bit with ChatGPT to see what ChatGPT says and what studies say. I researched further on and I really found all these things in studies. So as you already said, failing to communicate effectively, micromanagement, neglecting team development, ignoring diverse perspectives, and inconsistent decision-making. These are the top 5 mistakes that I found in studies that researchers say that leaders make when they work with other people. And I'm sure that you already lived some of them, these mistakes, and I'm also sure that you also make some of these mistakes, right? But you know what's the most interesting thing when it comes to these mistakes? Is to understand why. Because what I know from my work is that people do so many trainings in companies on how not to micromanagement, how to effectively communicate with other people, how to pay attention to the team's needs, how to accept diversity, how to be consistent in decision-making, how to manage their time, and all those things. Who in this room did at least one training on these aspects? Well, some of us. And the others, you didn't attend the trainings on these aspects? Okay. The main question that I love in psychology is why. Why do I do what I do? Why do people micromanage things? Why do people do not pay attention to other people's needs? And I think that by answering to all these questions, we will better work together. Because otherwise, we will tend to work only on the behavior and not on the mechanism. And what we do in psychology is to better understand mechanisms, inner mechanisms, when it comes to what people do. So just try to ask yourself, why do you sometimes fail to communicate effectively? Why do you think you fail to communicate effectively? I'm really waiting for an answer, so I'll stay here until someone says something. You are in fight and flight mode, and that's why sometimes you fail to communicate effectively. Does someone else has another idea? You have a God complex. So when you have this God complex, what do? You focus only on yourself and only on what so what you think seems to be the right answer, and there's no other answers than mine. Do you have other ideas? Time pressure. I don't have time to listen to all these people with their ideas. Why do I need to micromanagement? What do you think people need behind this behavior? Control? To take control. Lack of trust. So I need to do everything in order to make sure that each step is respected, right? Why do I neglect my team development? This is a hard one. Because rationally, we all say that I need to have a team and the team to grow and to understand themselves and to learn so many other things. But maybe unconsciously, we sabotage all these mechanisms. Why? Low self-confidence. And if other people around me will know better than me, then I'm at risk. So this is an unconscious mechanism that when I see people that are better around me on what I'm doing, just grows inside, and then unconsciously I'm sabotaging my team. Why do I ignore diverse perspectives? Because I'm always right. Because accepting different perspectives means I'm wrong. Accepting different perspectives mean that I am wrong. And I think that we all grew in this academic environment where not knowing things is bad, and accepting different opinions and debating on opinions was not something that we learn in school. So then accepting different perspectives is something that we perceive as being dangerous. And then why am I inconsistent in decision making? Besides the fact that, for example, I'm a Gemini. I have to come closer because
I don't see a problem of being a Gemini. I don't see a problem with that.
you don't see a problem.
Yeah.
No, I don't see a problem with that either. Yeah. we make such a good team together, right? Why are we inconsistent in decision making? Fear. I don't know if I have the right answer. I'm afraid that my answer is not the correct one, so I'm changing my answer. I'm still searching for the correct idea. And some of us also have this imposter syndrome. We don't feel that we know enough in order to be here, in order to be in this place. Is this the right place for me? Do I know enough in order to provide to other people correct ideas, or maybe to guide them, to lead them? And of course, because we were not taught in schools how to be leaders and how to interact. We come from a competitive environment, so it's not about interaction, it's about finding the right idea and being always right, and who is right will always be followed by other people. Well, what I know, since I'm working, I think, for 10 years in companies, but almost 20 years in my private office, is the fact that the most common mistake that leaders make is the fact that they have a low level of self-awareness. We all have a low level of self-awareness until we start to look at that, well, dark and maybe dirty place inside ourselves. And when we start to be connected with what's inside of us, then we will better understand why we do all these things. So my invitation here is I invite you in a short journey. And my wish here is to invite you to get a little bit more close to yourself. It's not so much about what studies say in psychology, but it's more about your own experience here. So we have like 20 minutes for this experience, and no worries, you're not going to do meditation exercises. Yet I know that I'm doing good meditation exercises. We're not going to do one now. But I'm going to invite you to look a little bit more closer to your inside perspective when it comes to the way you work and the way you interact with people from your work environment. So what does self-awareness mean? I'm not going to ask you to answer this question. I will tell you what self-awareness means. First of all, the ability to recognize and understand our own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, and at the same time to be able to understand how our reactions and how our cognitive mechanisms impact others. So this is the first step that we have to do, to pay more attention to our inner world in order to understand not only our impact into others, but also our impact to ourselves. Then, to be conscious about what I know, I know, but also to be conscious on what I don't know. This is very, very important when we think about efficacy. It's not enough to know what I know, it's imperative to know the things that I don't know. Because this is the perspective that will help me to grow. If I'm only focusing on what I know, I will just create a bubble of things that I know because I need to make sure that I know so many things in order to be your leader. But to be a better leader means that I will also stay connected to all these things that I don't know and be open and curious towards all these things that I don't know. And what we know about self-awareness and studies in leadership is that, of course, it leads to personal growth, effective leadership, building strong relationships, making informed decisions, and respond appropriately to others' needs. Because this is another important thing when it comes to leadership. It's not enough to respond. It's imperative to respond accordingly to what other people need. But something happens in this between space that we don't hear each other, we don't listen to each other, we don't understand each other, we don't accept each other. And let's see what's happening in this between space. Because we now have to understand how we can go further on to being self-aware. And I'm using this exercise when I'm working with teams, but also when I'm working with different groups of people. This is an image that I borrowed from somatic experiencing training. Somatic experiencing is a way of working with people that was started that Peter Levine started this form of working with people, and I'm doing an interpretation of his theory right now, but I really use it when I'm working with people. So, what we know from this image is that we have a problem that we have to solve. And I'm inviting you, all of you now, to work on this image and ask these questions. I have a problem to solve, and what we know from psychology is the fact that the first thing that happens when we have a problem to solve, and this problem might be a technical one, but also an interaction problem, the first thing that happens is that my body reacts. For example, 1 minute ago, when I realized I don't know how to say in English what I wanted to say, the first thing that I noticed about myself is that I started to feel something in my stomach. And I was paying attention to how my body reacted, and what I knew is that I started to feel heat, and that my cheeks started to be more red. So this is what being connected to our bodily sensations mean. To know that when we are going through a difficult situation, we perceive as being difficult, the first reaction is a bodily reaction. then what's happening is something very interesting. And that's why we say in psychology that only 10 or maybe 20% of what's happening right now between us is about the present moment. And 80-90% of what's happening, it's about our past. So me feeling all these things in my stomach and in my chest, it's not about the fact that you judge me now, but it's about the fact that I felt judged in my past. Does this make sense? So, after my physical sensations, what happened? My brain starts to find explanation for what's happening right now. And it's like we have this big drawer of interactions with other people from our past history. And when I'm doing something that I don't like, I'm just picking photos with me in different situations that are similar with this present moment. For example, 2 minutes ago, when I couldn't find my words, the first question that my mind asked was, is this new or is this old? No, it's old. I know that I had different other experiences. What happened in those previous experiences when you might felt judged? So all these memories just come into the present moment. And because emotions that affect part of our mind doesn't have time, then I don't know if what I'm feeling right now is about the present moment or the past moment. So I'm just starting to feel anxious because I did something wrong. I'm starting to feel anxiety and to be stressed because all these things that are in that significance corner started to kick in. Oh my God, you're not good enough. Why are you exposing yourself to speak in English if you're not sure that everything that you will say will be correct? Why are you doing all these things? You could have been at home right now, just being happy, drinking your coffee in the garden. And now you're just exposing yourself. Oh, you know that you like to be exposed, but not like that. You want people to know how good you are, not that you're not good at some things in your life. So what are you doing right now? You're vulnerable. Don't do it. Stop. Do you see how our mind creates a story on something that started from a problem, and then my body reaction, and then I stayed connected with my body reaction, and I know from my trainings that I have this space in my brain that is connected with all the memories. And all these memories just kick in this present moment. And then I feel anxiety. And afterwards, I create a story about my anxiety. And then I have some options, behavioral options. And one of the things that I know about myself, because my mother constantly tells me that, and I tell that to my daughter, just gather yourself. This is not the right moment and the right place. You have to do what you have to do. And now as a therapist, I'm saying to myself that you're allowed to feel what you're feeling, but you have to do what you have to do. So what's important about this model is that each time when we go through a difficult situation, a self-perceived difficult situation, maybe for other people will not be difficult, but for me it's a difficult situation. What my brain does is that my brain creates this model. And each time I'm going through all these stages, maybe it takes milliseconds, but I assure you that each of you, when you have a difficult situation, you go through all these stages. And what's the goal in this model? We will not solve our history, and it's not about our past, but it will help me be more self-aware. And knowing that this might happen brings more peace than not looking at what's happening inside of me. Even if I'm not solving this problem, 50% of the problem is solved because I'm looking at it. You know that teachers told us this in math? Do you remember that? By reading the sentence, 50% of the problem is solved? Well, it's the same in psychology. So only by understanding what's happening inside, you'll solve 50% of your interaction with other people. Because you move your focus from the other and from the problem to yourself to better understand what's happening inside. And this, you know what this brings for our nervous systems? Calm. When we're not looking to all these problems, our problems grow. But when we're looking to them, our system calms down. So I'm now inviting you for a few moments to just think about a difficult situation in your job interactions. You can think about a difficult situation with your wife if you want, it's okay. You don't have to share, of course. So just try to ask yourself and to be specific with that situation. One thing that bothered me was the interaction that I had with this specific person when this specific person did this specific behavior. So just take one moment to think about this situation. I'm sure that you all have at least one. You're not laughing. Okay, now that you have this situation in your mind, just ask yourself, how did that situation felt in my body? Where did you feel more tension in your body? Maybe you can also focus on how the situation impacts your body right now. Can you depict some reactions, bodily reactions? Can someone share a body reaction? You're so shy. Headache, pressure maybe on my head. Maybe something in my throat, maybe a pressure on my chest. And then just ask yourself, is this thing that I'm feeling regarding this situation is new or old? Is the first time when I'm feeling this reaction, or it's an old situation? I know about myself that I'm reacting like that. It's an old situation. If it's a new situation, just ask yourself, what do I know about myself when I have new reactions into an interaction? What do I know about myself when I don't know what to do in a situation? And I think some of us might already have some answers. And then just try to extract one feeling that you're having. You know that we have feelings when we work. We don't only use our prefrontal cortex. Anxiety maybe, anger, frustration. And then just try to see what you are telling to yourself when this situation is happening. One thought might be about myself, not about myself, but about yourself. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. Why am I not able to do all these things? Another way I can think about this situation is to say, you are so stupid. You are not able to do all these things. I'm sure that when you heard me say, you are so stupid, you didn't like it. And other things that we might say is that the world is so unfair. So many unfair things happen to me. So what we know from psychology is that when significance kicks in, first of all, it's one of the latest things that happen in our brain. The prefrontal cortex is slower than the emotional part of our brain, so whatever we think we're thinking, it's late. So it's just because we have this need to have a story on what it's happening. Otherwise, it's not helping in problem solving in that moment. And then, how do I react? When I feel these things in my body, When I remember so many interactions in my past experiencing, when I feel anxiety and when I say that I am not good enough, actually my belief is that people will say I'm stupid. That's why anxiety kicked in when I was not able to say the name of that guy. Because I don't want you to think that I'm stupid, and it's not about you, of course, it's my past history. And what's the tendency that I have? One tendency that I have is to run from those situations and not expose myself. That's why this is the first conference that I'm attending, speaking in English. Because I ran from all these situations, because I was afraid that my theory with people will say that I am stupid, will confirm. Another thing that I do in difficult situations is that I overcompensate. I do so much more than it's necessary to be done in that situation. For example, that's how micromanagement appears. Because I'm afraid of losing control, and I'm afraid that I will not, do well the things that I have to do, and that you will not do well the things that I need you to do. So I will just do everything. Because I'm afraid that if we as a team make a mistake, then you will say that I, as a leader, I'm stupid and I'm not a good leader, and so on. Does this make sense? Do you have an image of yourself in a difficult situation, and did you manage to go to all these questions? You know what's difficult for our nervous system? Is that we get stuck in only one or two of these things in this model. I might get stuck in my emotional reaction, for example, and feel intensely what's happening there and not being able to connect because I am so self-focused. Maybe sometimes I'm stuck in my significance and I'm just trying to find the perfect theory in order to solve this problem. Or maybe sometimes I'm doing so many things in order to solve this problem, and I'm not thinking about the big picture and about my emotional reactions and the way that I impact other people. So this is the biggest problem with this model, that we do not integrate all the dots in the model when we think about ourselves. So the big idea here is that being self-aware means to be able to go through all these steps in the model and to understand what's happening inside of us before we react. Because what other people see, they don't see our cognitive mechanisms. Maybe sometimes they hear and they can make inferences about them, but they don't see our cognitive mechanisms. They don't know our inner story. Maybe sometimes they don't see our emotions. They don't know how we feel inside. And of course, they don't know our story. And we're not going to work to do psychotherapy. So they don't need to know all these things. But I need to know all these things. But what they will see is our reaction, our behavior. And what's happening when we have a problem and we work in a team is that we have a reaction to another reaction, to another reaction, to another reaction, because maybe few of us are connected with ourselves, and few of us are able to say to ourselves, stop. This is something more than us doing the right job here. This is more than doing the right thing in this solving problem that we have right now. This is about me and my inner experiences, and we know that because we have these bodily sensations and because we have these emotional reactions in different situations. So one of the most important things from my presentation is to be able to connect all these dots. And my invitation is to just draw a star on a piece of paper, and just at the end of each week, maybe at the end of each day, but I know I put pressure when I say this, just draw this star and try to ask yourself, how was my day? Not from the things that I had to solve, but from my perspective. How did I feel? How did this day felt into my body? What's behind what I'm saying and what I'm doing? So why do we need it in leadership? Because only by doing all these things, we will be able to stay present and focused and connected and engaged with other people. And then we will feel safe inside. And only when we feel safe inside, we can create safe environment for the people that we work with. Not feeling safe in our body, not feeling safe in our mind, create unsafe work environments. So this is my big invitation here, to stay more focused and more connected on what's happening inside in order not only to create a safe space for ourselves, but also to create a safe space for others. So what's going to happen if we do that? You remember all these things that you already said at the beginning of my presentation. And what we know from studies is that when we are going to be more present in our emotional life and in our inner world, then we can create a constant and clear communication. We will be able to empower and trust other people because they will not threaten us only by their presence, only by what they know. Then we will be more able to grow because we will know what we don't know. And then we can gather information and expose ourselves in new environments. This is one thing that I said to myself, that this me exposing myself here is me creating the ability for myself to grow in a place where I didn't offer for me the possibility to grow. And then we will embrace diversity and inclusion because we will not feel danger because other people are different from us. This is one of the main things, as you said, this God thing that that leaders have. It's because I think that if I accept a different perspective, this will make me feel unsafe. I feel safe by creating my own idea about a situation. I feel safe when I convince you to think the way I think. Not only because I think it's correct, but because if we think the same way, this is the illusion of safety. But when we work in teams, this is one of the most dangerous things that we can do. Because when we work in teams, we need to have different perspectives on the same problem. But to be able to have different perspectives on the same problem, we also need a safe environment where we can share different perspectives. Where we feel that we are included, that it's okay to be diverse, and where we feel that we belong. And then we'll have transparent and consistent policies. So thinking about all these things is not being selfish as a leader. Thinking about myself as a leader is not being selfish because, we have this thing, this myth that a good leader thinks about other people. But first of all, a good leader has to think about himself or herself. And only this will take us into a safe space inside of us and will create a safe space for others to grow. Thank you.